Have you ever considered where music comes from? Before you start thinking of devices such as iPods, radios, CD or record players, that's not what I mean. What I'm referring to is where the ideas and inspiration needed to compose or perform a beautiful piece of music or write a memorable song, where do they come from? Of course, most people probably think the answer's straightforward. Music created by a composer or musician comes out of his or her musical thoughts and ideas, and they're produced within the brain. But is the answer really that simple? Just watch this short video clip of Pink Floyd guitarist Dave Gilmour, who's being interviewed for a documentary called The Story of the Guitar.
I have something where music just comes to me, and the best music, just suddenly it's there. It just slips out of your fingertips onto an instrument easily, and you worry about it afterwards. You think, where the hell did that come from? Who did I steal it from? Because it's so easy, and those are the best bits.
Now he describes there a sublime moment of inspiration, where he plays something and wonders, where did that come from? Now that isn't the response I'd expect him to make if he was in control of creating that music through his own thoughts and actions. I have to agree that there is a good case to be made for the brain being the source of any creative endeavour such as writing a piece of music. After all, it's generally accepted that it's the command centre of the body and the seat of our intellect, responsible for both creative and logical thought processes. And it's also the part of the human anatomy that most fascinates research scientists, who continue to discover more and more about this amazing organ. And it certainly is one of nature's most phenomenal creations. This ball of tissue weighing only 3 pounds, it contains over 100 billion neurons, or nerve cells, which generate electrical impulses at rates of up to 10 trillion messages every second. To put this in a way which is maybe a little more meaningful to us, if we were to compare the processing power of the brain to that of the most powerful supercomputer, well, in fact, there's no comparison. The brain's the winner by a huge distance. It may be hard to believe, but even with the huge advances that we've seen in computer technology in recent years, the processing power of the brain is still at least 100 times that of the largest supercomputer ever built. So, if our brains are so incredibly powerful, then one could argue that it's reasonable to believe that they're capable of creating music. Now, I wouldn't dispute that the brain can do this, or even that it's the source of much of the music that we hear today, but I don't sign up to the view that all music is created in this way. You see, there are other musicians and composers, apart from Dave Gilmour, who feel that they receive music from outside the mind rather than produce music from within it. Joseph Haydn, for example, apparently used to put on his best clothes before composing, saying, "I'm going to commune with God, and I must be appropriately dressed." Johannes Brahms stated that when he was composing at his best, he felt that a higher power was working through him. And this was a view apparently shared by Beethoven, who lambasted the violinist Schimpanzig for complaining about the difficult fingering required to play one of his works, saying, "When I composed that passage, I was conscious of being inspired by God Almighty. Do you think I can consider your puny fiddle when he speaks to me?" Max Bruch explained the process of composing, saying that the composer must sit in silence and wait for direction from a force that's superior to the intellect. And these views were echoed by Gustav Mahler, who said, "I don't choose what I compose, it chooses me." Finally, when talking about his opera Madame Butterfly, Puccini said that the music of the opera was dictated to him by God, and that his job had merely been to bring it to paper. Now it's pretty clear that these composers believed that the source of their music was beyond the mind and the brain. I suppose you could argue that they lived in simpler times, before the numerous scientific discoveries of the last 100 years, and they might not have held those same views had they lived in this more enlightened age. After all, we've made so much technological progress throughout the 20th century that we increasingly expect science to be able to explain anything we want to know about life, the universe, and everything. And of course, as our scientific understanding of the world around us has increased, so the belief in supernatural or spiritual matters amongst the general public has decreased. So much so that if any of these composers were around today making claims that their music was composed by God, then they'd quickly be made a laughingstock by the media and the public at large. So given all of this, you might expect that current day musicians would be much less likely to believe that any musical inspiration came from beyond the mind and the brain, and that the Dave Gilmour example which we saw earlier would just be a rare exception. But in fact, this isn't the case at all. If we look at some of the musicians who've been inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame over the past 30 years, there are many who've openly made similar comments to Dave Gilmour. Let's start with the Beatles. John Lennon once said, "Songwriting is like being possessed, like a psychic or a medium. You try to go to sleep, but the song won't let you." Fellow Beatle, Paul McCartney, recently gave an account of how the music to Yesterday had come to him in a dream. He said it just came complete. And Michael Jackson's had similar experiences. He's on record as saying, "I wake up from dreams and go, wow, put this down on paper." The whole thing is strange. You hear the words, everything is right there in front of your face. I feel that somewhere, someplace, it's been done, and I'm just a courier bringing it into the world. Robert Plant once described how the words to the song Stairway to Heaven came. Jimmy Page, he said, had written the chords and played them for me. I was holding the paper and pencil. Then all of a sudden, my hand was writing out words. I just sat there and looked at the words, and then I almost leapt out of my seat. Bruce Springsteen was a lot more succinct, saying, "In the end, you have to look at a song and not know exactly where it came from." And finally, let's just watch a clip of a documentary called Endless Harmony. It's about the Beach Boys, and in this clip we hear Carl Wilson and Brian Wilson talking about their album, Pet Sounds.
The music does have a spiritual quality to it, and of course, that's just a basic truth about music, is that music is, it's an expression of spirit, and it's a living expression, so it has a real, people connect to it, because people are spirit, so.
I never really fully took credit for the songs that I wrote, because I knew that a higher force was with me when I was writing.
Now hold on a moment. Let's just rewind and hear that last sentence again.
I never really fully took credit for the songs that I wrote, because I knew that a higher force was with me when I was writing.
Now when you look at the words used by Brian Wilson, you'll notice they're so close to those used by Brahms 100 years earlier. And similarly, when you look at Michael Jackson's description of how music comes to him, then isn't it a close match to Puccini's description? So from Brahms to the Beach Boys, from Beethoven to the Beatles, it's pretty clear that all these musicians felt the same way about the experience of writing music. And it doesn't seem to matter whether they lived today or 200 years ago, or whether they were writing classical music or rock and roll. It seemed to them that their music came from beyond the brain. Now I'm not suggesting that all music comes about in this way, and I'm sure that a lot of the music that we hear is created out of thought processes in the mind. But I'm equally sure that some music is received from sources beyond the mind, and that, as Dave Gilmour put it,
And those are the best bits.
Of course, that opens the door to another big question. If the source of the music isn't the brain, then what is it? Is it God, as Haydn, Beethoven and Puccini believed, or is the source something else? We'll be examining that topic in detail in the next video in this series, so if you're sufficiently intrigued, then please join us again in Channeling Music Part 2.